The blinding sun beat down on Amelia Crawford's tear-streaked face as she stood frozen in the town square of Copper Creek, Montana Territory, 1876. The cruel laughter of the townsfolk echoed in her ears, their taunts cutting deeper than any knife ever could. No dowry, no husband. Matilda Hopkins, the banker's wife, called out with a smug smile. "What man would want a penniless orphan like you?" Amelia clutched her faded calico dress, the only decent one she owned, and forced herself to stand tall despite the humiliation burning through her veins. At 22, she had already endured more hardship than most faced in a lifetime. First losing her mother to consumption when she was just 12, then her father to a mining accident 3 years ago. She had managed to keep their small homestead running by taking in mending and laundry, but the drought had driven everyone to desperation, and her clients had dwindled to nearly none. "I may not have money, Mrs. Hopkins," Amelia replied, her voice steadier than she felt, "but I have my dignity." The laughter only grew louder. Amelia's proposal to start a small school for the town's children had been met with ridicule at the town meeting. Without a dowry or family connections, she was considered worthless, in their eyes a burden rather than an asset to Copper Creek. "Dignity doesn't feed a husband or children," Matilda sneered. "My Gerald says your land will be auctioned for taxes within the month anyway. Maybe then someone useful can make something of it." Amelia bit her lip to keep from crying out. The tax notice had arrived just yesterday, demanding $60 she simply didn't have. Her father's life insurance had been depleted long ago on medicine and funeral costs. As the crowd continued their mockery, a tall figure pushed through on horseback, a magnificent chestnut stallion that parted the onlookers like Moses at the Red Sea. The rider sat straight and confident in the saddle, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed Stetson. Dust swirled around him as he brought his horse to a stop between Amelia and her tormentors. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. "Luke Irwin," someone in the crowd whispered, and a ripple of unease spread through the gathering. Amelia had heard the name. Everyone in 3 counties had. Luke Irwin, the most successful cattle rancher in the territory, owner of the sprawling Triple I Ranch. A man who had come to Montana with nothing 5 years ago and through hard work, grit, and uncanny business sense had built an empire. A man who rarely came to town and even more rarely involved himself in local affairs. "What's going on here?" he asked, dismounting in one fluid motion. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean, hipped in his denim pants and faded blue shirt. "Nothing that concerns you, Mr. Irwin." Gerald Hopkins, the banker, stepped forward, suddenly deferential. "Just a town matter regarding Miss Crawford here." Luke turned to Amelia, and for the first time she saw his face clearly. He couldn't have been much older than 30, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes the color of a summer sky. Those eyes assessed her now, not unkindly. "Miss Crawford," he tipped his hat slightly, "are you being treated fairly?" Before Amelia could answer, Matilda Hopkins laughed shrilly. "She came to the town meeting begging for charity, Mr. Irwin. Wants to start a school when she can't even pay her taxes. No family, no dowry, nothing to recommend her." Luke's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened as he looked at the banker's wife. Then he turned back to Amelia. "Is that true? You want to start a school?" Amelia straightened her shoulders. "Yes, sir. The children here need education. I have teaching experience from when I assisted at the school in Virginia City before my father and I moved here. And these fine citizens," his tone made it clear what he thought of them, "are refusing because you lack a dowry. What does a school have to do with marriage?" "Everything in this town has to do with proper standing," Gerald Hopkins interjected. "The school would need community support, and Miss Crawford simply doesn't have the connections." Luke looked around at the townsfolk, many of whom suddenly found the ground intensely interesting. "I see," he said quietly. Then louder. Well, I'm looking to hire a teacher for the children at Triple I. Got about 15 youngsters, their ranch hands kids and such with no proper schooling. Would you be interested in the position, Miss Crawford? Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Was this real? Or some cruel extension of the joke? I would be very interested, Mr. Irwin, she managed. Good. It pays $40 a month plus room and board at the ranch. He glanced at Hopkins. Should help with those taxes, I reckon. Matilda Hopkins made a choking sound. But she has no recommendations, no proper training. Luke Irwin turned slowly to face the banker's wife. I don't recall asking for your input, Mrs. Hopkins. I'm rich enough to make my own decisions about who I hire. He turned back to Amelia. Can you be ready to leave tomorrow morning? I'll send a wagon for you and your belongings. Amelia felt dizzy with the sudden change in her fortunes. Yes, Mr. Irwin, thank you. He nodded once, remounted his horse, and looked down at her with those piercing blue eyes. 8 o'clock, he said, then addressed the still gaping crowd. Folks might want to remember that a person's worth isn't measured by what's in their pockets. With that, he turned his horse and rode out of town, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a stunned silence. Amelia stood there, feeling the stares of the townsfolk burning into her. But now their eyes held something different: curiosity, calculation, and in some cases resentment. Luke Irwin wasn't known for charity. If he had offered her a position, they were reassessing her value. Well, Matilda Hopkins finally said, voice dripping with venom, isn't that convenient? I wonder what kind of teaching he expects from you. Amelia's cheeks burned. The educational kind, Mrs. Hopkins. Good day. With as much dignity as she could muster, Amelia turned and walked away, her heart hammering in her chest. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter in her life, away from the cruelty of Copper Creek. Whether it would be better or worse remained to be seen, but she had few options left. As she walked back to her small homestead outside town, Amelia let the tears flow freely at last. Tears of relief, of fear, and of something else she couldn't quite name. Luke Irwin had stepped into her life like a character from one of the dime novels. She occasionally indulged in the mysterious benefactor with unknown motives. She only hoped those motives were as honorable as his actions had appeared. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect Montana spring day. Amelia had spent the night packing her meager belongings: her mother's china teapot, her father's pocket watch, a few dresses, her books, and the family Bible. Everything she owned fit into 2 trunks and a carpet bag. She had slept little, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. What would life be like at the Triple I Ranch? What were the children like? And most unsettling of all, what kind of man was Luke Irwin? Really, at precisely 8 o'clock, she heard the rumble of wagon wheels approaching her cabin. Smoothing her best dress, a navy blue cotton with white trim, Amelia stepped onto the porch, trunks already waiting beside her. To her surprise, it was Luke Irwin himself who drove the wagon, not some ranch hand as she had expected. He wore the same style of practical clothing as yesterday, though his shirt was clean and his face freshly shaven. He brought the team to a halt and jumped down with easy grace. Miss Crawford, he nodded, removing his hat. In the morning light, she could see that his hair was the color of sun-bleached wheat, and a small scar crossed his right eyebrow. Mr. Irwin, she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. I appreciate you coming yourself. I expected a ranch hand. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I was in town on business anyway. Thought I'd save one of my men the trip. His eyes took in the trunks. Is this everything? Yes, sir. He nodded, replaced his hat, and loaded her trunks with efficient movements that spoke of a lifetime of physical labor despite his current wealth. Amelia stood awkwardly, unsure whether to offer help or simply wait. Your house, he said as he secured the last trunk. What happens to it now? Amelia sighed. The bank will take it, I suppose. I'm 3 months behind on the taxes. Luke studied the small cabin thoughtfully. Shame. Your father built it? Yes, Jacob Crawford. He was a carpenter before trying his hand at mining. Good craftsmanship, Luke observed, running a hand along the porch rail. How much do you owe in taxes? Amelia hesitated, embarrassment warming her cheeks. $60 for the year. Luke nodded, helping her up onto the wagon seat. I'll have my foreman stop by the bank and settle it. No sense letting good property go to waste. Mr. Irwin, Amelia gasped. That's far too generous. I couldn't possibly. Consider it an advance on your salary, he interrupted, climbing up beside her. The ranch always needs additional housing. We can work out a fair arrangement. Amelia wanted to protest further but recognized the stubborn set of his jaw. This wasn't charity being offered, but a business transaction, one that preserved her dignity while solving her immediate problem. Thank you, she said simply. Luke nodded once, clicked to the horses, and they were moving. Amelia couldn't help looking back at the only home she'd known for the past 7 years, wondering if she'd ever see it again. It'll still be there, Luke said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Land doesn't go anywhere. The journey to the Triple I took nearly 3 hours, heading northwest out of Copper Creek. Amelia had never been this far from town before, and she drank in the magnificent scenery, rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, wildflowers dotting the prairies in splashes of color, hawks circling overhead in the vast blue sky. Luke proved to be a man of few words, but not unfriendly. He pointed out landmarks and boundaries, naming creeks and ridges with the familiarity of someone who had studied every inch of his domain. How large is your ranch, Mr. Irwin? Amelia finally asked. 20,000 acres, give or take, still expanding when good land becomes available. Amelia tried to comprehend such vastness. Her father's property had been a mere 80 acres, and even that had seemed large to her, and all of this is. Yours, a smile touched his lips. Mine on paper, but land belongs to itself, Miss Crawford. We're just passing through. It was a surprisingly philosophical statement from a man who had the reputation of being a hard-headed businessman. As they crested a hill, the Triple I Ranch headquarters came into view, and Amelia couldn't suppress a gasp. She had expected something substantial, but the reality exceeded anything she had imagined. A large 2-story house of timber and stone dominated the landscape, surrounded by numerous outbuildings, corrals, and bunkhouses. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and figures moved about on horseback and on foot. In the distance, cattle dotted the hillsides, hundreds, perhaps thousands of them. It's like a small town, she murmured. About 60 people live and work here year-round, Luke confirmed. More during roundup season. The children you'll be teaching are mostly the families of my married hands and foremen. As they approached, Amelia felt nervousness flutter in her stomach. What if she wasn't up to the task? What if the children or their parents rejected her? Luke seemed to sense her anxiety. They're good people, he said. Hard-working and honest, they'll respect you if you respect them. They pulled up before the main house, and immediately people appeared. A woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. A tall, dark-haired man with a weathered face. 2 younger men who bore a resemblance to Luke, and several curious children peering around corners. Mrs. Abernathy, my housekeeper, Luke introduced the older woman. Samuel Knox, my foreman, and my cousins James and William Irwin, who help run things. Amelia nodded politely to each. Mrs. Abernathy gave her a swift, assessing look that wasn't unfriendly but certainly reserved. The new teacher. She asked Luke. Miss Amelia Crawford, Luke confirmed. She'll need quarters prepared. Already done, Mrs. Abernathy replied. The old foreman's cabin by the creek. It's been cleaned and aired out. Thank you, Amelia said, but the housekeeper had already turned her attention back to Luke. There's trouble with the Watson brothers again, she informed him. Samuel can fill you in. Luke's expression darkened momentarily. I'll deal with it. He turned to his foreman. Sam, would you show Miss Crawford to her cabin and help with her things? I need to handle this business first. Of course, boss, the foreman replied. He was a tall, lean man with intelligent eyes and a gray streaked beard. Welcome to Triple I, Miss Crawford. Thank you, Mr. Knox. As Luke strode off with his cousins, Samuel Knox helped Amelia down from the wagon. Don't mind Mrs. Abernathy, he said in a low voice. She's protective of the boss, been with him since he started building this place. She'll warm up once she knows you. Is she worried I'll be a poor teacher? Amelia asked, gathering her carpet bag. Samuel chuckled, lifting one of her trunks with ease. No, madam, I reckon she's worried you'll be too pretty for the boss's peace of mind. Amelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mr. Irwin hired me to teach Mr. Knox, nothing more. Yes, madam, he agreed easily, and a proper teacher is what we need. But facts are facts. The boss has never brought a young lady out to the ranch before. Causes talk. As if to confirm his words, Amelia noticed several women watching from various vantage points as they walked toward a neat cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings, near a creek lined with cottonwood trees. Pay it no mind, Samuel advised, noticing her discomfort. Folks always gossip when there's something new. They'll settle once they see you're here for the children. The cabin proved to be far more comfortable than Amelia had anticipated. Smaller than her family home but well built, it contained a main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen. Simple furniture, a bed, a table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair, and a small writing desk had been arranged with care. Fresh wildflowers stood in a mason jar on the table and the windows gleamed in the sunlight. It's lovely, Amelia said sincerely. Mrs. Knox, my wife, Martha, helped get it ready, Samuel said with obvious pride. She'll be by later to see if you need anything. The schoolroom's in the converted barn just beyond those trees. Luke had it fixed up last winter, but we haven't had a proper teacher till now. After Samuel had brought in her second trunk and departed, promising that Martha would come to escort her to dinner at the main house later, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. 24 hours ago, she had been facing ruin and humiliation. Now she had employment, a home, and purpose, all because a stranger had intervened when no one else would. It seemed too good to be true, which made Amelia wonder what complications might lurk beneath the surface of this apparent good fortune. Her father had always told her to trust her instincts, and those instincts told her that Luke Irwin was a good man. But he was also clearly a complicated one, with secrets and troubles of his own. The Watson brothers, Mrs. Abernathy had mentioned. Who were they, and what trouble had they caused? Sighing, Amelia stood and began to unpack. Whatever mysteries surrounded her new employer would reveal themselves in time. For now, she had a school to prepare and children to teach. That, at least, was something she knew how to do. Martha Knox proved to be a warm, motherly woman in her 40s with laugh lines around her eyes and capable hands. She arrived as promised, bringing a basket of fresh bread and preserves to tide you over. You must be exhausted, coming all this way, she said, helping Amelia arrange her books on the small shelf above the writing desk. And what a surprise it was when the boss rode in last night and announced he'd hired a teacher. We've been hoping for one, of course, but Luke Irwin isn't known for acting on impulse. It was rather sudden, Amelia admitted. I'm still not entirely sure why he offered me the position. Martha gave her a sidelong glance. He said you stood up to the whole town of Copper Creek by yourself. Said anyone with that kind of backbone would be just right for teaching our wild bunch. She smiled. We have 15 children between 5 and 16, and most of them haven't seen the inside of a proper schoolroom. 15, Amelia repeated, feeling both excitement and nervousness. I'll need to assess their levels of knowledge first thing. That's tomorrow's worry, Martha said firmly. Tonight you'll meet everyone at dinner. The boss has all the ranch families eat together in the main house on Sundays. It's tradition. The dinner turned out to be more like a feast, with 3 long tables set up in the spacious dining room of the main house. About 40 people were present, ranch hands and their families, the cousins James and William, Mrs. Abernathy presiding over the food service, and Luke Irwin at the head of the center table. He stood when Amelia entered with Martha. Everyone, he called, and the room quieted immediately. This is Miss Amelia Crawford, who will be teaching our children starting tomorrow. I expect you all to make her welcome." There was a chorus of greetings and nods, some more enthusiastic than others. Amelia found herself seated between Martha Knox and a young woman introduced as Rebecca Miller, wife of one of the horse trainers. "We're all so grateful you're here," Rebecca said earnestly. "I've been trying to teach my boys their letters, but with the baby and all my other duties." She gestured to an infant sleeping in a cradle nearby. "I'm happy to be here," Amelia replied, and was surprised to realize she meant it. Despite the strangeness of her situation, there was something comforting about being among these straightforward, hard-working people. Throughout dinner, Amelia observed Luke Irwin. He ate with the same efficiency he seemed to bring to everything, occasionally engaging in conversation with those around him but mostly listening. Several times, she caught him watching her, his expression unreadable. After the meal, as coffee and apple pie were served, Luke approached her table. "Is everything satisfactory with your quarters, Miss Crawford?" "Very much so, Mr. Irwin. Everyone has been most kind," he nodded. "Good. The schoolroom is ready for your inspection whenever you wish. I've had paper, slates, and basic supplies ordered, but if you need anything else, make a list for Mrs. Abernathy." "Thank you. I'll visit the schoolroom first thing tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be away for a few days on business. Samuel knows how to reach me if there are any problems." "I'm sure everything will be fine," Amelia assured him, wondering about the nature of his business but knowing it wasn't her place to ask. Luke nodded again, excused himself, and moved on to speak with his foreman. "He's always busy, that one," Martha commented. "Built all this in just 5 years and still drives himself like he hasn't a penny to his name." "How did he do it?" Amelia asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Create all this from nothing, I mean." Martha exchanged glances with Rebecca. "Hard work, mostly. He started with just 100 acres and a few head of cattle. Knew how to spot good investments, too, but there was trouble in the beginning, still is sometimes." "The Watson brothers," Amelia guessed, remembering Mrs. Abernathy's comment. Martha's expression tightened. "You heard about them already?" "Yes, they're the worst of it. 3 brothers who own the next ranch over. They've been trying to drive Luke out since he arrived, rustling cattle, damming streams, cutting fences. Nothing they can be proven guilty of, mind you." "But why?" "Surely there's enough land for everyone." "Greed," Rebecca said simply. "The Watsons had been buying up all the small ranches around here when they went bust. Then Luke arrived and not only survived but thrived, showed others it could be done. They can't stand it." Amelia frowned, thinking of how quickly Luke had stepped in to save her property. "So that's why he was concerned about my land." "Likely," Martha agreed. "The Watsons have been moving into Copper Creek territory lately. Luke wouldn't want them getting a foothold through your property." The conversation turned to other topics after that, but Amelia found herself watching Luke with new understanding. His actions, which had seemed purely charitable, had a practical dimension as well. It didn't lessen her gratitude, but it did ease some of her discomfort about accepting his help. After dinner, Luke disappeared with his foreman and cousins, and Amelia was escorted back to her cabin by Martha and several excited children, all eager to know when school would start. "Tomorrow afternoon," she told them, smiling at their enthusiasm. "I need the morning to prepare." Alone in her cabin that night, Amelia wrote in her journal by lamplight, trying to make sense of the whirlwind changes in her life. She thought of Luke Irwin's piercing blue eyes and enigmatic expressions. He was unlike any man she had ever known, powerful yet unpretentious, commanding yet fair. A puzzle she couldn't quite solve. With a sigh, she closed her journal. Time would provide answers. For now, she had 15 children to prepare for, and that was more than enough to occupy her mind. The following weeks settled into a pattern. Amelia taught school 6 days a week, from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Her pupils ranged from 5-year-old Timmy Miller, who was just learning his letters, to 16-year-old Daniel Knox, Samuel's eldest son, who showed a remarkable aptitude for mathematics and engineering. The converted barn proved to be an excellent schoolroom, spacious, well lit from large windows, and furnished with sturdy desks and benches that Luke had commissioned from a carpenter in Helena. A large slate board dominated one wall, and bookshelves held the beginnings of a proper library. Amelia found herself thriving in her new role. The children were eager to learn, their parents supportive, and the entire ranch community treated her with increasing warmth and respect as they saw the positive changes in their youngsters. Luke Irwin remained something of a mystery, however. He had returned from his business trip after 3 days, but was frequently away on other matters. When at the ranch, he worked alongside his men, inspected the schoolroom progress with keen interest, and always inquired politely about Amelia's needs. But he maintained a certain distance that she found both puzzling and, strangely, disappointing. One evening in late April, about a month after her arrival, Amelia was walking by the creek near her cabin when she encountered Luke. He was sitting on a fallen log, whittling a piece of wood with a pocket knife, his expression distant and thoughtful. He looked up at her approach and immediately stood. "Miss Crawford, Mr. Irwin, I'm sorry to disturb your solitude." "No disturbance," he assured her. "I was just taking a moment of quiet. The ranch can be overwhelming at times." It was the most personal statement he had ever made to her. Encouraged, Amelia gestured to the log. "May I join you?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but he nodded, moving over to make room. "What are you making?" she asked, nodding at the wood in his hands. "A horse," he said, somewhat self-consciously. "For Timmy Miller's birthday next week." "Not very good, I'm afraid." Amelia examined the carving. It was rough but recognizably equine with careful attention to the proportions. "I think it's wonderful. Timmy will treasure it." Luke's hands, strong and calloused from years of ranch work, turned the small carving over. "My father used to whittle. He made me a whole farm set when I was a boy, horses, cows, even tiny chickens." "He taught you well then." Luke's expression closed slightly. "He taught me many things, not all of them as pleasant as whittling." Amelia sensed a painful story there but didn't press. "The children are doing very well in school," she said instead. "Even Daniel, who I feared might think himself too grown for lessons." Luke nodded, resuming his carving. "Samuel says the boy wants to design bridges, says you've been giving him extra problems to solve. He has a natural gift for it. With the right education, he could become an engineer." "And how would a rancher's son from Montana Territory manage that?" There was no mockery in Luke's tone, only genuine curiosity. "There are colleges that would take him with proper preparation," Amelia replied. "It would take money, of course, but money isn't the issue," Luke interrupted. "Opportunity is what matters. If the boy has the ability and desire, he should have the chance." He paused, then added softly, "That's what America is supposed to be about, isn't it? Not where you come from, but what you can become." "Yes," Amelia agreed, struck by the passion in his normally measured voice. "Exactly that." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the creek bubbling nearby and the soft scrape of Luke's knife against wood. "You've made a difference here already," Luke finally said. "The children are learning, yes, but it's more than that. There's a stability that wasn't here before." Amelia felt warmth bloom in her chest at his words. "Thank you, that means a great deal coming from you." Luke looked at her then, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since their meeting in Copper Creek. What he saw seemed to both please and trouble him, for his expression softened even as his brow furrowed slightly. "You're not what I expected, Amelia Crawford," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Someone who would teach our children their letters and numbers, take her salary and keep to herself, not someone who would integrate so thoroughly, care so much." "And is that disappointing?" "No," he said immediately, "not at all. It's just—" Whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. They both turned to see Samuel Knox riding toward them, his expression urgent. "Luke," he called. "Riders coming in from the east boundary, looks like trouble." Luke was on his feet instantly, all trace of the reflective man gone, replaced by the decisive rancher. Watson brothers? Can't tell yet, but who else would it be? Luke turned to Amelia. Go back to your cabin and stay there, lock the door. But please, he said, and something in his eyes made her nod. Be careful, she said, a flicker of surprise, then something warmer passed across his face. I will. He jogged to where Samuel waited with a second horse, swung into the saddle with practiced ease, and the two men galloped off toward the main house. Amelia hurried back to her cabin, heart pounding. Through her window, she could see men gathering, some with rifles, others mounting horses. Whatever was happening, it was serious. She paced the small cabin, torn between obedience and concern. Finally, unable to bear the waiting, she slipped outside and made her way to the main house. Martha Knox was on the porch with several other women, all looking eastward with worried expressions. What's happening? Amelia asked, joining them. The Watsons, Martha replied grimly. They're claiming some of our cattle strayed onto their land and they're keeping them as compensation. Luke's gone to sort it out. How many men did they bring? Too many for a simple cattle dispute, one of the other women said. My Tom says they're looking for a fight. Amelia felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She had heard stories of range wars in the territory's bloody affairs that sometimes resulted in multiple deaths. Shouldn't someone notify the sheriff? She asked. Martha gave a bitter laugh. Sheriff Hayes, he's deep in the Watsons' pocket, no help there. They waited, tension thick in the air, as the sun began to set. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably less than one, riders appeared on the horizon, returning to the ranch. They're all coming back, Martha said with obvious relief. Doesn't look like anyone's hurt. Indeed, as the men rode into the yard, Amelia could see Luke at their head, apparently unharmed. His expression, however, was thunderous. He dismounted and strode to the porch. Martha, have Mrs. Abernathy prepare dinner for the men. It's been a long day. Of course, Martha replied. Everyone's all right. Yes, Luke said shortly. His eyes fell on Amelia and his expression softened fractionally. Miss Crawford, I thought I asked you to stay in your cabin. I was worried, she admitted. What happened? Luke sighed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. The usual Watson tactics. Accusations, threats, posturing. They had 30 men with them for what should have been a simple discussion about a dozen stray cattle. Did you get your cattle back? A grim smile touched his lips. Yes. And made it clear that further misunderstandings would not be tolerated. He glanced at the other women. Everything's fine now, ladies, just the Watsons being themselves. The women dispersed, heading off to help with dinner preparations or check on their husbands. Luke turned back to Amelia. I apologize for the disruption to your evening, he said formally. There's no need for apologies. This is your ranch. These are your concerns. I understand that. Luke studied her for a moment, then offered his arm. Would you join me for a walk? I find I need to clear my head after dealing with the Watsons. Surprised but pleased, Amelia placed her hand on his arm. I'd be happy to. They walked in silence for a while, away from the bustle of the ranch buildings and toward the creek that ran behind Amelia's cabin. The setting sun painted the Montana sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. It's beautiful here, Amelia said softly. Yes, Luke agreed. That's why I fought so hard for it. He paused, then added, the Watsons made me an offer today. Said they'd pay double what the land is worth if I'd sell to them and move on. Amelia looked at him in surprise. You wouldn't consider it, would you? Luke shook his head. This is my home now, the home of everyone who works for me. I won't be driven out. He looked down at her, his expression serious. But I won't lie to you, Miss Crawford. The situation with the Watsons is precarious. If you'd prefer to seek a teaching position elsewhere, somewhere safer, I would understand. Are you asking me to leave, Mr. Irwin? No, he said quickly. No, I'm not. I'm simply concerned for your safety. Amelia felt a rush of warmth at his concern, followed by a surge of determination. I appreciate that, but I have no intention of leaving. The children need me, and She hesitated, then continued more softly, I need them. For the first time since my father died, I feel like I have a purpose, a place I belong. Luke's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Amelia thought he might reach for her hand. Instead, he nodded. I'm glad to hear it, he said. The triple I is better with you here. As they continued their walk, Amelia found herself acutely aware of Luke's presence beside her, his height, his strength, the occasional brush of his arm against hers. Something had shifted between them tonight, some barrier lowered. Whether it was her concern for his safety or his for hers, they had moved beyond employer and employee into something that felt more like friendship. Or perhaps, Amelia thought with a flutter in her chest, something more than friendship. The next morning, Amelia found a small wooden horse on her porch, more finely carved than the one Luke had been working on for Timmy. Beside it was a note in a strong, masculine hand. Thank you for your concern yesterday. It means more than I can say. L.I. Amelia held the carving to her heart, smiling as the sunrise gilded the Montana landscape in gold. As spring gave way to summer, life at the Triple I settled into a rhythm punctuated by the regular duties of a working ranch. Cattle were moved to higher pastures, hay was cut and stacked, and the children continued their education despite the increasing heat that sometimes made the schoolroom stifling. Amelia's relationship with Luke Irwin continued to evolve in small, subtle ways. He began to join her for walks more frequently, sometimes discussing ranch business, sometimes simply enjoying the evening air together. He visited the schoolroom often, taking genuine interest in the children's progress. Once he even stayed for Amelia's reading of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, sitting at the back of the room with the rapt attention of a schoolboy. For Amelia, these moments were precious beyond measure. She found herself thinking of Luke at odd hours, wondering where he was, what he was doing. When he was away on business, the ranch seemed dimmer somehow, as if he took some vital energy with him. She knew she was falling in love with him. She also knew that loving Luke Irwin was a complicated proposition. As owner of the Triple I, he had responsibilities that consumed his time and attention. The ongoing conflict with the Watson brothers remained a constant shadow. And Luke himself maintained a certain reserve. Even as they grew closer, some inner barrier he seemed unwilling or unable to lower completely. One hot July afternoon, as Amelia dismissed her pupils for the day, she was surprised to find Luke waiting outside the schoolroom, holding the reins of 2 saddled horses. Mr. Irwin, she greeted him, feeling the familiar flutter in her stomach at his presence. What brings you here? I thought you might enjoy a ride, he said. It's too hot to be indoors, and there's a spot by the river I'd like to show you. Amelia glanced down at her practical but decidedly unequestrian dress. I'm not exactly dressed for riding. Luke's eyes, blue as the Montana sky, held a glint of amusement. The mare is gentle and it's not far, unless you'd rather not. No, I'd love to, Amelia said quickly. Just give me a moment to gather my things. Soon they were riding side by side across the Triple I's rolling grasslands. Luke had provided a gentle bay mare for Amelia, and despite her limited riding experience, she found herself enjoying the freedom of movement and the cooling breeze against her face. Luke rode with the easy confidence of a man born to the saddle. In his element this way, he seemed more relaxed than Amelia had ever seen him. How are the new books working out? He asked. A shipment of readers and mathematics texts had arrived from Chicago the previous week, purchased at considerable expense. Wonderfully, Amelia replied. The children are so eager to learn. Daniel has already worked through half the algebra text. Luke nodded, pride evident in his expression. Samuel says the boy talks of nothing but building bridges now. He has a remarkable mind, Amelia agreed. With proper education, there's no limit to what he could achieve. I've been thinking about that, Luke said. About sending him east for proper schooling. There's a preparatory academy in Boston that might take him with the right recommendations. Amelia looked at him in surprise. You would do that for him? Luke shrugged, though his expression was anything but casual. Why not? Talent shouldn't go to waste because of circumstances of birth. That's incredibly generous. It's practical, Luke countered. The West needs men who can build things, design things. In 20 years, Daniel could be constructing railways across the Rockies. They rode in companionable silence for a while, cresting a small hill that revealed a vista of the distant mountains, purple and majestic against the horizon. It's just ahead, Luke said, pointing to a grove of cottonwood trees that marked the course of a river. They dismounted at the edge of the grove, and Luke secured the horses before leading Amelia through the trees to the riverbank. The spot was idyllic, a grassy clearing beside a deep pool where the river widened and slowed. Wildflowers dotted the grass and the cottonwoods provided welcome shade. It's beautiful, Amelia breathed. I found it my first week here, Luke said, his voice softer than usual. Sometimes I come here to think, or just to remember why I'm fighting so hard for this land. Amelia looked at him curiously. You never speak much about your past, about what brought you to Montana. Luke was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the flowing water. Then he sat on a fallen log and gestured for Amelia to join him. I was born in Pennsylvania, he began. My father was a steelworker in Pittsburgh, hard man, harder life. My mother died when I was 10. After that, it was just my father and me, and he drank often. Worked and drank and took out his frustrations on whatever was closest. He paused. Usually me. Amelia felt a pang of sorrow. I'm so sorry, Luke. It was the first time she had used his given name, and he glanced at her with a flicker of surprise before continuing. I left at 16. Worked my way west, taking whatever jobs I could find. Ranch hand, miner, timber cutter. Saved every penny. By 23, I had enough to buy 100 acres and a small herd. 5 years later. He gestured vaguely, indicating the vast triple I. You built all this yourself, Amelia said softly. That's remarkable. Luke shook his head slightly. Not entirely by myself, I had help, good men who believed in what we were building. But yes, I started with nothing but determination and a dream. A dream of having your own ranch. A dream of having a home, Luke corrected. Somewhere that belonged to me, where I made the rules, somewhere safe. Amelia understood then why the conflict with the Watsons cut so deep for him. They weren't just threatening his property, they were threatening his hard-won security, his sense of belonging. And now the Watsons want to take it from you, she said. Luke's expression hardened. They can try, but I won't give up without a fight. There must be some legal recourse, Amelia suggested. Surely the territorial governor, the law moves slowly out here, Luke interrupted, and the Watsons have friends in high places. For now, we're at a stalemate. They push, I push back. Concern must have shown on Amelia's face, for Luke's expression softened. Don't worry about the Watsons, I've dealt with worse. He stood and offered his hand. Come, I want to show you something else. Amelia placed her hand in his, feeling the strength and warmth of it as he helped her to her feet. Instead of releasing her immediately, Luke held her hand a moment longer than necessary, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then he led her along the riverbank to where a small peninsula jutted into the water. Look there, he said, pointing to the far bank. At first, Amelia saw nothing unusual. Then movement caught her eye, a family of deer, a doe and 2 fawns drinking at the river's edge, unaware of the human observers. Oh, she breathed, delighted by the sight. They watched in silence until the deer, sensing their presence, bounded away into the forest. I've always loved this place, Luke said quietly. No matter what troubles I'm facing, it reminds me that there's beauty in the world worth fighting for. He turned to look at Amelia then, and something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. When I met you in Copper Creek, he said, standing up to those small-minded people with nothing but your dignity and courage, I saw that same kind of beauty. Amelia felt warmth flood her cheeks. Luke, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I just wanted you to know that bringing you here to the Triple I was the best decision I've ever made. Not just for the children, but for everyone, for me." The confession, halting though it was, hung in the air between them. Amelia saw vulnerability in Luke's eyes that he rarely allowed anyone to glimpse, hope mixed with uncertainty, as if he'd offered her something precious and wasn't sure how she would respond. "I feel the same," she said softly. "Coming here, meeting you, it changed everything for me." Luke took a step closer, close enough that Amelia could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the slight scar on his eyebrow, the way his expression softened as he looked at her. "Amelia," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I know I haven't said much about my feelings. Words don't come easily to me, but I want you to know that the crack of a rifle shot shattered the moment." Both of them froze, then Luke was moving, pulling Amelia down and behind him in one swift motion. "Stay low," he ordered, all tenderness gone from his voice, replaced by urgent command. That came from the direction of the ranch. More shots followed, distant but unmistakable. Luke's expression hardened into grim determination. "The Watsons," he said. "It has to be." He looked at Amelia, conflict evident in his face. "I need to get back. You'll be safer here." "I'm coming with you," Amelia insisted. "Those are my students, my friends there." Luke looked as if he might argue, then nodded sharply. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say." They hurried back to the horses, mounted quickly, and rode hard toward the ranch, taking a route that kept them concealed by trees and ridgelines as much as possible. As they approached, Luke slowed their pace, scanning the landscape with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to danger. Smoke was rising from one of the distant outbuildings, the hay barn, Amelia realized with a jolt of fear. Figures on horseback moved about the ranch yard, some familiar, others not. Luke led them to a small rise that overlooked the ranch headquarters. From this vantage point, they could see men taking cover behind buildings and corrals, exchanging gunfire with riders who were attempting to drive off a herd of cattle from the nearest pasture. "They're rustling our breeding stock," Luke said, his voice tight with anger. "And burning our winter feed." He turned to Amelia. "Stay here, keep hidden." "Luke, no, I mean it, Amelia," he said firmly. "I can't help my men if I'm worried about you." His expression softened briefly. "Please, for me." Reluctantly, Amelia nodded. Luke squeezed her hand once, then mounted his horse and rode swiftly down the hill, keeping to cover until he reached the edge of the ranch buildings. Amelia watched in helpless fear as Luke joined his men, taking a rifle from one of them and immediately organizing a counterattack. The Triple I hands, under Luke and Samuel's direction, began to move with greater coordination, pushing back the rustlers and reclaiming control of the breeding herd. Minutes stretched into an hour as the battle continued. The shooting gradually became less frequent, and Amelia could see the rustlers, the Watsons' men, she presumed beginning to retreat. Then, to her horror, she saw a rider break away from the main group and gallop directly toward Luke's position. The sun glinted off something in the rider's hand, a pistol, raised and aimed. Without thinking, Amelia stood and screamed, "Luke! Behind you!" Luke turned, saw the approaching rider, and threw himself sideways just as the man fired. The bullet missed Luke but struck the man beside him, James, one of his cousins. James fell, clutching his shoulder. Luke raised his rifle and fired in one smooth motion. The attacking rider tumbled from his horse, which galloped on riderless. The remaining rustlers, seeing their companion fall and realizing they were losing the fight, finally broke and fled, galloping away to the east toward Watson territory, Amelia guessed. Only when the last rider had disappeared from sight did Amelia leave her hiding place, hurrying down to the ranch as quickly as her skirts and the terrain allowed. The scene that greeted her was one of controlled chaos. Men were moving purposefully, securing livestock, tending to the wounded, battling the fire in the hay barn. Amelia spotted Martha Knox organizing the women to help with the injured and hurried to join them. "Martha, where's Luke?" she called. Martha pointed toward the main house. He took James inside. The boy's hurt, but not too badly, thank the Lord. Amelia rushed to the house, finding Luke in the large sitting room. James lay on a sofa, his shirt removed, while Luke cleaned a bullet wound in his shoulder. Mrs. Abernathy stood nearby with bandages and a basin of water. "How bad is it?" Amelia asked. Luke looked up, relief evident in his eyes when he saw her. "Clean through the shoulder, painful, but he'll heal." He turned back to his cousin. "You were lucky, Jim." James, pale but conscious, managed a weak smile. "Lucky you're a good shot, you mean." "If you hadn't dropped that fellow." Luke's expression darkened. "It was Roy Watson, youngest of the brothers, dead?" James asked. Luke nodded grimly. "He gave me no choice." He finished cleaning the wound and began to bandage it with practiced movements. "This isn't over. The other brothers won't let this stand." "What will you do?" Amelia asked. Luke secured the bandage, then straightened, meeting her eyes. "Whatever I have to, I won't let them threaten my people." He glanced at Mrs. Abernathy. "Can you finish here? I need to check on the others." The housekeeper nodded, taking Luke's place beside James. Luke gestured for Amelia to follow him onto the porch. Outside, the ranch was returning to a semblance of order. The fire in the hay barn had been contained, though the structure was clearly damaged. Men were rounding up scattered cattle, while others stood guard at strategic points around the perimeter. "Are there many injured?" Amelia asked. "James took the worst of it," Luke replied. "A few others have minor wounds. We were fortunate." His expression was grim as he surveyed the damage. "They'll be back. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon." "Can't you send for the territorial marshal? Surely rustling and arson, by the time a marshal arrives, any evidence will be long gone," Luke interrupted. "And the Watsons will claim they were merely retrieving stolen cattle." "It would be my word against theirs." Amelia felt a surge of frustration. "There must be something." "There is," Luke said, his voice hardening. "I'm riding to their ranch tomorrow. This ends now, one way or another." Alarm shot through Amelia. "That's madness. They'll kill you." "They'll try," Luke agreed. "But I won't be going alone, and I won't be going unprepared." "Luke, please." Amelia caught his arm, forcing him to look at her. "There has to be another way, a legal way." Something in Luke's expression softened as he looked down at her. "You're worried about me." "Of course I am," Amelia exclaimed. She hesitated, then continued more quietly. "I care about you, very much." Luke's hand came up to touch her cheek, gentle despite the calluses. "And I care about you, Amelia, more than I thought possible." His expression grew serious again. "Which is why I have to do this. The Watsons won't stop until they're forced to. I won't live under constant threat, and I won't ask you or anyone else at the III to do so either." Before Amelia could respond, Samuel Knox approached, his expression urgent. "Luke, riders coming." Flying the territorial marshal's flag. Surprise registered on Luke's face. The marshal, already. They moved to the front of the house in time to see a group of 6 riders approaching 5 men in the distinctive long coats of territorial lawmen, led by a graying, broad-shouldered man with a star pinned to his vest. "Marshal Hayden," Luke murmured. "I thought he was in Helena." "You know him?" Amelia asked. "By reputation, he's a fair man, tough but fair." Luke stepped forward as the marshal and his deputies dismounted. "Marshal Hayden, welcome to the III." The marshal nodded, his weathered face serious. "Mr. Irwin, looks like we arrived a bit late for the excitement." "You could say that," Luke agreed cautiously. "What brings you to my ranch, Marshal?" "Information that the Watson brothers were planning something against you," Hayden replied. "Seems we were right, just not fast enough." He surveyed the damage with experienced eyes. "Want to tell me what happened here?" Luke glanced at Amelia, then back to the marshal. "Let's talk inside. Samuel, see that the marshal's men are looked after." Over coffee in Luke's study, Luke provided a detailed account of the attack, omitting nothing, including the fact that he had shot and killed Roy Watson. "Self-defense," the marshal said when Luke finished. "From what your men and the evidence will show, at least." "Though the Watsons won't see it that way." "No," Luke agreed, "they won't." Marshal Hayden studied Luke thoughtfully. This feud has gone on long enough, Irwin. 3 years of increasing violence. It needs to end before more men die. I agree completely, Luke said. Which is why I'm riding to the Watson place tomorrow to settle things. The marshal's eyebrows rose. That would be unwise. So is waiting for them to attack again, Luke countered. Next time it might not be just my cousin who gets shot. It might be one of the children or… His eyes flickered briefly to Amelia, who stood near the door. The marshal followed his gaze, his expression softening slightly when he saw Amelia. Miss Crawford, Amelia supplied. I'm the teacher here. Miss Crawford, the marshal nodded. If you'll excuse us for a moment, I'd like to speak with Mr. Irwin privately. Reluctantly, Amelia left the room, closing the door behind her. She moved to the far side of the hallway but could still hear the murmur of male voices, though not the words being exchanged. After what seemed like a very long time, the door opened and both men emerged. The marshal looked grave but satisfied, while Luke's expression was unreadable. We've reached an understanding, Luke said to Amelia. The marshal will be staying at the Triple I tonight with his men. And tomorrow, Marshal Hayden added, Mr. Irwin and I will ride to the Watson Ranch together, officially to investigate the attack and the death of Roy Watson, unofficially to see if we can't bring this feud to a peaceful conclusion. Amelia looked from one man to the other. And if you can't? The marshal's weathered face grew stern. Then I'll be forced to take more drastic measures. I have the authority to arrest both parties and let a territorial judge sort things out. Neither the Watsons nor Mr. Irwin want that. No, Luke agreed, we don't. After the marshal departed to check on his men, Luke turned to Amelia. His expression had lost some of its hardness, but tension still radiated from him. Are you all right? Amelia asked quietly. Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been better. But at least there's a chance this might end without more bloodshed. Do you trust the marshal? Yes, Luke said without hesitation. Hayden's a good man. If anyone can make the Watsons see reason, it's him. He paused, looking at her intently. I'm sorry about today. The river, what I was trying to say before we were interrupted. Amelia felt warmth rise to her cheeks. We'll have time to talk when this is over. Luke nodded, though something like uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Yes, when it's over. That night, despite her exhaustion, Amelia found sleep elusive. She lay in her bed in the cabin by the creek, listening to the night sounds and thinking of Luke, his revelation about his past, the way he had looked at her by the river, the moment of connection that had been broken by violence. And tomorrow he would ride into potential danger. A soft knock at her door startled her. Wrapping herself in a shawl over her nightgown, Amelia approached cautiously. Who is it? It's Luke. Heart pounding, Amelia opened the door. Luke stood there, still fully dressed, looking tired but determined. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, he said, but I needed to see you before tomorrow. Amelia stepped back, allowing him to enter the small cabin. Lamplight cast soft shadows across his features, emphasizing the strong line of his jaw and the intensity of his eyes. What is it, Luke? He stood in the center of the room, seeming almost uncertain, a strange quality in a man normally so decisive. I wanted to finish what I started to say by the river, he said finally. In case tomorrow doesn't go as planned. Alarm shot through Amelia. Luke, he held up a hand. Please, Amelia, let me say this. She fell silent, watching him gather his thoughts. When I met you in Copper Creek, Luke began, I acted on instinct. I saw someone with courage and dignity being treated unfairly, and I wanted to help. He paused, a small smile touching his lips. But I also saw a beautiful woman who stirred something in me that I thought was long buried. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. These past months, Luke continued, watching you with the children, seeing how you've become part of the Triple I family, getting to know you, I've come to care for you, Amelia, deeply, in ways I never expected to care for anyone. He took a step closer, close enough that Amelia could feel the warmth radiating from him. I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, he said softly. But I know what's in my heart. I love you, Amelia Crawford. Whatever happens tomorrow, I needed you to know that. Tears pricked Amelia's eyes. Oh, Luke, I love you too. I think I have almost from the beginning. Luke's expression transformed, joy breaking through the weariness and worry. He reached for her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice husky. In answer, Amelia rose on tiptoes, bringing her lips to his. The kiss began softly, tentatively, but quickly deepened as months of unspoken feelings found expression. Luke's arms encircled her, drawing her close against the solid warmth of his chest. Amelia's hands found their way to his shoulders, then to the back of his neck, where her fingers tangled in his hair. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. Luke rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. I should go, he murmured, though he made no move to release her. Stay, Amelia whispered. Not, I don't mean, she blushed. Just hold me for a while, please. Luke's eyes opened, searching hers. Whatever he saw there must have reassured him, for he nodded. They sat together on the small sofa before the fireplace, Luke's arm around Amelia's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. They spoke softly of many things, their hopes, their dreams, the future they might build together if tomorrow went well. I never expected to find love here, Amelia confessed. After my father died, I thought I would live out my days alone, teaching other people's children. Luke's arm tightened around her. And I never expected to find someone who would see past the ranch, past what I've built, to the man beneath. He kissed the top of her head. You've given me something I thought I'd never have, Amelia, a chance at real happiness. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them both. Amelia drifted to sleep, listening to the steady beat of Luke's heart, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. She woke at dawn to find Luke gently disentangling himself from her. I have to go, he said softly. The marshal wants to ride out early. Amelia sat up, suddenly fully awake. Be careful, Luke, please. He kissed her, a tender promise. I will, I have too much to live for now. At the door, he turned back. Whatever happens today, know that I love you. That won't change. Amelia watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun, and whispered a prayer for his safe return. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Amelia tried to keep busy, helping Martha Knox organize the cleanup efforts and visiting the injured men, including James, who was recovering well under Mrs. Abernathy's stern care. But her thoughts were constantly with Luke and the marshal, wondering what was happening at the Watson Ranch. It was late afternoon when Samuel Knox, who had been watching from a vantage point outside the ranch, came galloping in. Riders coming, he called. The boss and the marshal, looks like they're alone. Amelia rushed out with the others, straining to see through the dust raised by the approaching horses. As they drew nearer, she could make out Luke and Marshal Hayden, both looking tired but unharmed. Luke dismounted in one fluid motion and was immediately surrounded by his men, all asking questions at once. His eyes, however, sought and found Amelia. The smile he gave her was small but filled with meaning. Once the initial commotion had subsided, Luke addressed the gathered ranch hands and families. The marshal and I have reached an agreement with the Watson brothers, he announced. There will be no more attacks, no more rustling, no more threats from either side. A murmur ran through the crowd. How can we trust them? Someone called. Marshal Hayden stepped forward. Because I'll be staying in the territory to ensure the agreement is honored, and because the alternative for both parties would be much worse. What kind of agreement? Samuel Knox asked. Luke glanced at the marshal, who nodded slightly. A business arrangement, Luke explained. The Watsons have agreed to sell their western range, the land that borders the Triple I, to me, at a fair market price. In exchange, I've agreed to drop any claims against them for yesterday's attack. More murmurs, some approving, some skeptical. And they agreed to this. William Irwin, Luke's other cousin, sounded incredulous. They didn't have much choice, the marshal said dryly. With Roy dead and clear evidence of rustling and arson, they were facing serious charges. This way they save face and get fair compensation for land they can't effectively use anyway. It's not ideal, Luke admitted, but it's a solution that lets everyone move forward. His eyes found Amelia again, and that's what matters now, moving forward. The crowd gradually dispersed as people returned to their duties, many stopping to congratulate Luke or express relief that the feud appeared to be over. Eventually, only Luke, Amelia, and the marshal remained in the yard. "I'll be heading back to town," Marshal Hayden said. "Need to send some telegrams and make arrangements for a deputy to be stationed nearby for a while." He looked between Luke and Amelia, a knowing glint in his eye. "I'll stop by tomorrow to finalize the paperwork." After the marshal rode off, Luke turned to Amelia, his expression softening. "Walk with me?" he asked. They strolled toward the creek, neither speaking until they were well away from the buildings and other people. "I was so worried," Amelia finally said. Luke took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know, I'm sorry for that." "What really happened at the Watsons?" Luke sighed. "It wasn't easy. Ethan and Paul Watson were, understandably, angry about Roy, but they're businessmen at heart, and the marshal made it clear that their options were limited." He paused. "I also offered something they didn't expect." "What was that?" "A partnership of sorts. Not with the ranch, but with getting our cattle to market. They have connections in Chicago that I don't. I have more experience with the Eastern trails. Working together, we both stand to profit." Amelia looked at him in surprise. "After everything they've done, you'd work with them?" Luke shrugged. "Business is business, and sometimes the best way to end an enemy is to make them a partner." His expression grew serious. "I'm tired of fighting, Amelia. Tired of looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next attack will come. If this arrangement gives us peace, it's worth it." "And you trust them to keep their word?" "I trust the marshal to make sure they do," Luke replied. "And I trust that they're smart enough to recognize a good deal when they see one." He squeezed her hand. "But enough about the Watsons. There are more important things to discuss." They had reached the bank of the creek, where a large cottonwood tree provided shade. Luke led Amelia to a smooth boulder that served as a natural seat. "Last night," he began, "I told you I love you. I meant it, Amelia, with all my heart." "I love you too, Luke," Amelia replied softly. "When I built the Triple I," Luke continued, "I thought having land of my own, building something that was mine, would be enough. But these past months have shown me that a ranch, no matter how successful, isn't truly a home without someone to share it with." He took both her hands in his. "I want to share it with you, Amelia, not as my employee but as my wife." Amelia's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Luke, are you asking?" "I'm asking you to marry me," Luke said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "To build a life with me here, to help me make the Triple I not just a successful ranch but a true home." Joy welled up in Amelia's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Luke, I will marry you." Luke's face broke into a smile more radiant than any she had seen from him before. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, Luke rested his forehead against hers, his blue eyes shining with happiness. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted. "This wasn't exactly planned." Amelia laughed, feeling lighter than air. "I don't need a ring, I just need you." Luke's expression grew serious again. "You should know what you're agreeing to, Amelia. Life out here isn't easy, even at the best of times. The Triple I is successful now, but ranching is always a gamble, and I'm not. I'm not always an easy man to live with." "I know who you are, Luke Irwin," Amelia said softly. "I've seen you in good times and bad. I've seen how you care for your people, how you fight for what matters. That's the man I'm choosing to marry." Luke kissed her again, more gently this time. "I don't deserve you," he murmured against her lips. "Yes, you do," Amelia countered. "We deserve each other. We've both fought hard to get where we are." They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, planning their future together. They would marry in August, once the summer roundup was complete. Amelia would continue teaching "The Children Need You." Luke had insisted, but they would live in the main house together. "And your cabin by the creek," Luke added, "would make a perfect schoolhouse for the younger children in bad weather. The converted barn is a long walk for the little ones." As they approached the ranch buildings, they could see activity in the yard, people gathering, talking animatedly. "What's going on?" Amelia wondered. "I think someone guessed our news," Luke replied, nodding toward Martha Knox, who was watching their approach with a knowing smile. Indeed, as they entered the yard, a cheer went up from the assembled ranch hands and their families. "Took you long enough, boss." Samuel Knox called to general laughter. Luke shook his head, smiling ruefully. "Not much privacy on a ranch, is there?" "None at all," Martha agreed, coming forward to hug Amelia. "But we couldn't be happier for you both." That evening, a spontaneous celebration erupted at the Triple I. Tables were set up in the yard, food was prepared, and someone produced a fiddle. Under the stars, with lanterns providing pools of golden light, the ranch community celebrated not just the engagement of their boss to the teacher, but also the promise of peace after years of tension. Luke and Amelia danced together, his arm strong around her waist, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Around them, other couples joined in: Samuel and Martha Knox, James Irwin with Mrs. Abernathy's niece who helped in the kitchen, ranch hands with their wives. "Look at them," Luke murmured, nodding toward where the children played at the edge of the gathering. "That's the future right there. That's what we're building for." Amelia followed his gaze, her heart full. "Our children will join them someday," she said softly. Luke's arm tightened around her. "Our children," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "I like the sound of that." As midnight approached, Luke and Amelia slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand toward her cabin. "I should let you rest," Luke said when they reached her door, though reluctance was evident in his voice. Amelia smiled up at him. "One more kiss first." The kiss was long and sweet, a promise of the life they would build together. "I love you, Amelia Crawford," Luke whispered when they finally parted. "Soon to be Amelia Irwin." "I love you too," Amelia replied, touching his face gently. "My heart is rich enough in you." Luke's eyes, reflecting the starlight, held all the love and promise that Amelia could ever have wished for. As she watched him walk back toward the main house, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. And that was wealth beyond measure. The wedding of Luke Irwin and Amelia Crawford took place on a perfect August day, with the majestic Montana mountains providing a backdrop that no cathedral could match. The entire Triple I gathered for the occasion, along with friends from neighboring ranches and even a few curious townsfolk from Copper Creek, though notably not the Hopkins family. Amelia wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha and the other ranch women had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once belonged to Luke's mother, sent by an aunt in Pennsylvania after Luke wrote to tell her of his engagement. She carried wildflowers gathered that morning by her students, who had insisted on decorating everything from the ranch house to the ceremony site by the creek. Luke, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, watched with undisguised wonder as Amelia walked toward him on Samuel Knox's arm. The gruff foreman, who had agreed to give the bride away, looked suspiciously misty-eyed beneath his weathered exterior. The ceremony was conducted by a circuit riding minister who had arrived the previous day. His words, speaking of love and commitment, of building a life together through good times and bad, seemed written especially for Luke and Amelia, who had already weathered storms that would have broken lesser spirits. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded. "You may kiss your bride." Luke needed no further invitation. His kiss was tender yet possessive, a man claiming his happiness at last. When they turned to face their cheering friends and neighbors, Amelia saw in Luke's eyes a joy so pure it brought tears to her own. The celebration lasted well into the night, with feasting and dancing and toasts to the couple's health and happiness. Even Marshall Hayden attended, bringing news that the agreement with the Watson brothers was holding firm. "Seems they've found it more profitable to work with you than against you," he told Luke. Ethan Watson actually asked me to convey his best wishes, though I think that might be stretching the truth a bit," he added with a wry smile. When the last guests had departed and the ranch grew quiet under the blanket of stars, Luke led Amelia to the main house, their home now, together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irwin," he said softly as they crossed the threshold. "Home," Amelia repeated, savoring the word. "Our home." Later, in the privacy of the master bedroom that Luke had renovated for their use, with new curtains and a larger bed and a small bookshelf for Amelia's beloved books, they came together as husband and wife, their love expressed in the most intimate way possible. Luke's touch, gentle yet passionate, showed Amelia yet another facet of the complex man she had married, a tenderness reserved for her alone. Afterward, lying in the circle of Luke's arms, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From public humiliation in Copper Creek to this security, belonging, and a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Luke asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "How lucky I am," Amelia replied. "How differently things might have turned out if you hadn't stopped in Copper Creek that day." Luke pulled her closer. "I believe some things are meant to be, Amelia. I might have taken a different route that day, or you might have left town before I arrived. But somehow, I think we would have found each other eventually." "My romantic cowboy," Amelia teased gently. "Who would have thought it?" Luke chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly beneath her ear where it rested on his chest. "Don't tell my men, I have a reputation to maintain." Amelia lifted her head to look at him, suddenly serious. "You're a good man, Luke Irwin, the best man I've ever known, and I'm so proud to be your wife." Luke's eyes darkened with emotion. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. "And I'm proud to be your husband, Amelia Irwin. Prouder than I've ever been of anything." As autumn painted the Montana landscape in golds and reds, life at the Triple I settled into a new rhythm. Luke and Amelia worked side by side, each with their own responsibilities but always supporting each other. Amelia continued teaching, now in the converted creek cabin that proved perfect for the younger children, while the older ones still used the barn schoolroom. With Luke's encouragement, she also began to take a more active role in the business side of the ranch, applying her organizational skills and quick mind to the account books and correspondence. Luke, for his part, found that sharing his burden of responsibility made it lighter. He had always been respected by his men, but with Amelia by his side, the ranch became not just a well-run operation but a true community. On a crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors, Amelia shared her suspicion that their family would be growing in the spring. Luke's reaction, initial shock giving way to joy so intense it brought tears to his eyes, was something Amelia knew she would treasure forever. "A baby," he whispered, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our child." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though his expression left little doubt. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Luke replied, gathering her into his arms. "Grateful, humbled, terrified, but mostly just complete." He kissed her forehead. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted, Amelia, a true partner, a home filled with love, and now a family of our own." The news of Amelia's pregnancy spread quickly through the ranch, bringing congratulations and a flurry of preparations. Martha Knox appointed herself unofficial guardian of Amelia's health, ensuring she rested properly and ate well. The children in her school were excited at the prospect of a ranch baby, as they called it, and often asked earnest questions about when the baby would be big enough to join their classes. As winter settled over the Triple I, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland, Luke and Amelia spent cozy evenings planning for their child's arrival. They converted a small room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, with Luke himself crafting a beautiful wooden cradle. "My father taught me woodworking," he explained as he sanded the rails smooth. "It was one of the few good things he gave me. I want our child to have better memories." "They will," Amelia assured him, her hand resting on her growing belly. Our child will know only love and security. Luke set aside the sandpaper and placed his hand beside hers, rewarded with a firm kick from the baby within. Strong, he observed, smiling, like their mother. Christmas at the Triple was a joyous affair. Luke had arranged for gifts for every child on the ranch, and Amelia organized a special program where her students performed songs and recitations for the entire community. The main house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and a massive tree stood in the corner of the great room, hung with paper ornaments made by the children and topped with a star that Luke had carved. On Christmas morning, after the communal celebration, Luke presented Amelia with a small, carefully wrapped package. "What's this?" she asked. "You already gave me the new books and the shawl." "This is something different," Luke said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Something I've been working on for a while." Curious, Amelia unwrapped the package to find a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she gasped when she saw the first page, written in Luke's strong, clear hand. "For my beloved wife Amelia and for our child, that they might know their father's story." The pages that followed contained Luke's autobiography, his childhood in Pennsylvania, his journey west, the building of the Triple I, and finally, meeting Amelia. It was written simply but with powerful honesty, holding nothing back about his struggles and triumphs. "Luke," Amelia breathed, tears filling her eyes. "This is incredible." "I want our child to know where they come from," Luke explained, his voice husky with emotion. "The good and the bad. I want them to understand that it's not where you start that matters, but the choices you make along the way." Amelia wrapped her arms around him, holding him close. "This is the most precious gift anyone has ever given me," she whispered. Luke held her gently, mindful of her condition. "You gave me a future, Amelia. I wanted to give you my past." As winter gave way to spring, the Triple I prepared not just for the annual cycle of ranch life, but for the arrival of its newest member. The business partnership with the Watsons was proving surprisingly successful, with both ranches benefiting from their combined resources for cattle drives and market negotiations. The feud that had threatened everything Luke had built seemed finally, truly behind them. In late April, as the prairie burst into bloom with wildflowers of every description, Amelia went into labor. The ranch doctor had been summoned days earlier, staying in a guest room to be ready when the time came. Martha Knox and Mrs. Abernathy, both experienced with childbirth, stood ready to assist. Luke, banned from the bedroom during the delivery as was customary, paced the hallway outside like a caged lion, wincing at every cry from his wife. Samuel Knox and James Irwin took turns keeping him company, offering awkward words of encouragement and, eventually, a glass of whiskey to steady his nerves. After 14 hours of labor, the cry of a newborn pierced the night. Minutes later, the doctor emerged, tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Irwin," he said. "You have a daughter. Mother and child are both doing well." Luke stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Then he was moving, pushing past the doctor to enter the bedroom where Amelia lay propped up on pillows, her face tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Luke," she said softly, "come meet your daughter." On legs that felt suddenly unsteady, Luke approached the bed and gazed down at the tiny face nestled against Amelia's breast. A shock of dark hair, impossibly small features, and when the baby's eyes flickered open briefly, he saw they were the deep blue of all newborns. "She's perfect," he whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch her cheek. Amelia smiled up at him. "Would you like to hold her?" With infinite care, Luke took his daughter into his arms, marveling at how small and light she was, how completely dependent on him and Amelia for everything. Love, fiercer and more protective than anything he had ever felt, surged through him. "What shall we name her?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Amelia's eyes met his. "I was thinking maybe Elizabeth after your mother, Elizabeth Hope Irwin." Luke's throat tightened. Elizabeth Hope, he repeated. It's beautiful, perfect for her. As the sun rose on a new day, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink, Luke sat beside Amelia on the bed, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. Outside, the triple I was coming to life men heading to their duties, horses being fed, the rhythms of ranch life continuing as they always had. But within the walls of the main house, everything had changed. The future that Luke and Amelia had dreamed of had arrived in the form of this tiny, perfect being. "Thank you," Luke said softly, taking Amelia's hand. "For what? For everything. For coming into my life that day in Copper Creek. For seeing something in me worth loving. For giving me Elizabeth." He brought her hand to his lips. "For making me the richest man in Montana territory." Amelia's smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. "Not because of your ranch or your cattle or your land. No," Luke said, gazing at his wife and daughter with a heart so full it might burst. "Because I have you, both of you. That's wealth beyond measure." As Elizabeth Hope Irwin slept peacefully between her parents, the morning sun bathed the room in golden light, promising a new day and a bright future for the family and the Triple I Ranch. In that moment, surrounded by love and possibility, Luke and Amelia knew that their greatest adventures were just beginning adventures they would face together, as a family. And that, truly, was riches enough for anyone.